Welcome back to Q Dads, guys, and yes, it is me, Ben. And today we are discussing the brand new show Robin Hood that's just dropped on MGM. Now, of course, this was for me a little bit beige and probably more beige than Robert Loxley's shirt after it was washed.
I washed and dried it.
I was genuinely ready to do weekly breakdowns and pick apart the details and follow Robert of Loxley's transformation into the outlaw legend that we all know. But after watching the first two episodes, disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, until there was no more. So before we get into why, let's just quickly set the scene for the legend itself. So Robin Hood is essentially an outlaw who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. A man of the people who took a stand against corrupt leaders living in Sherwood Forest with his band of merry men. Now, the story's been retold hundreds of times, books, films, cartoons, and even futuristic versions. But at its heart, it's always about rebellion and justice. Now, this show, and historically, it is set around 1186, during the reign of King Richard the Lionheart. And this is about 120 years or so after William the Conqueror's rule. Now, England is at a time where it's ruled by heavy taxation, inequity, and brutal law enforcement. The perfect backdrop for a hero who'd had enough. And, of course, as I'm British, I was really hoping that I would love this, considering that I've actually been to some of the places that they've mentioned in the series. Now, MGM's Robin Hood tries to reimagine that legend that's grounded in a bit of a gritty way, focusing on Robert of Loxley before he became the Man in Green. We follow him growing up in Nottinghamshire, watching tragedy after tragedy shape him. His father's execution, his mother's death, both moments that should feel emotional, but somehow just didn't land. And it's all there in the script, but the delivery just feels kind of cold and rushed, or in some way just off. Now, along the way, we're introduced to the Sheriff of Nottingham, playing as this scheming political power that we'd all expect. Though here, in these first two episodes, it feels more like a background character than a real villain. At least, again, so far. Then we have Lord Huntington, who instantly makes it clear to us that he doesn't like Robert of Loxley very much. And their interactions, although they're meant to feel tense, it's like a bit of a power struggle between the noble and the commoner. But again, it never quite clicks. And I'm not sure if that's the actors or the way they're portrayed, but again, it's just something that just doesn't sit right with me. Now, one of the first moments that really made me frown was when Huntington rides in and he demands to see his daughter Marion. And when he's kind of told she's not there, he just storms off. And again, this isn't because it's emotional, but because it's convenient for the story. It's one of these scenes that, we just need to move the plot along. And for me, I think that's where this kind of spirals a little bit downhill. And then we've got Marion herself, who, in this version, attends a pagan wedding. Now, which I actually thought was quite an interesting twist. Something that could have added a bit of texture to her world, her beliefs. But instead of using that as a way to deepen her or Robert's character even, it just sort of happens with no real weight or follow-up. And again, I am conscious that I'm only on episode 2. But for me, it just felt like a little bit of a scene filler to fluff out this story of Robin Hood. And of course, whilst we're talking about these moments, there are a few questionable choices as well. We have to talk about the unnecessary and frankly uncomfortable sex scenes between the sheriff's daughter and the captain of the guards. Now, they're random and they add nothing to the plot really. They kind of go completely sideways to the tone of the show. It's like they were just thrown in because someone thought, gritty means explicit. And it felt like they were trying to be something more like Game of Thrones or even Outlander. But not every show needs to have this. For me, it wasn't needed, and I think it just kind of took a little bit of the magic away. And then, of course, we move on to the pacing of the show. So, many of the scenes were prolonged and felt like fillers, especially that whole blossoming love story between Robert and Marion. It stretched over 2 episodes with very little emotional payoff. Now, we kind of get what the show is trying to do, show that innocence before the rebellion. But it just feels like they're dragging the feet in to reach the good stuff. And for me, I feel like that these could have been included within flashbacks later on in the series, to kind of emphasise a pinnacle moment. But to have 2 episodes, toying and backwards and forwards between the two, I just don't think was needed at all. And then there is that spiritual subplot about Wild Edric. Now, I did really want to like this, honestly, and it could have been a great way to kind of weave myth and folklore into the world. And it started off, the first kind of 10 seconds really well. But then the way it was shot later on, it kind of felt amateurish. Considering this is MGM, it's surprisingly rough around the edges. Tonally, I was confused. Visually, it was inconsistent and not as half as mysterious or mystical as I think it should have been. And if I'm honest, I think that kind of subplot really disappointed me. So of course, combine all of that with some uninspired dialogue, it all starts to feel flat. There's entire conversations that sound like placeholder lines. The kind of dialogue that might work if there was some stronger chemistry or tension behind it. But here, it just highlights how slow everything feels. And I don't know if that kind of added to the avalanche of feelings, making that disappointment for me grow and grow. But I began to really dislike the show. And then I couldn't help but notice every small detail. So by the time I was coming to the end of episode 2, I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't invested at all. But with that being said, I have got to give credit where it's due. So the ending of the episode is easily, for me, the best part so far. We see Robert being goaded into showing off his archery skills, and when he does, things spiral quickly. He shoots one of the king's deers, which of course in that era is basically a death sentence, and then he kills a forester and flees into the woods. And now that energy at the end of the show, I think was needed right from the start. Suddenly it feels dangerous, tense, like we're finally getting the birth of Robin Hood, the outlaw, not just Robert the farm boy. And honestly, if the show had opened with that scene, it might have hooked a lot more people in. And again, like I said, we could have had the backstory through a series of flashbacks rather than 2 whole episodes. So yeah, I am disappointed. Robin Hood should have been this thrilling mix of grit, legend and rebellion. Instead, we've got so far what feels uneven, forced and weirdly lifeless for a story that's supposed to be about freedom. Now again, I did say that I did want to cover this as a weekly show. Probably going to keep my eye on how the rest of the season does play out. But at this point, I'm not holding my breath. I mean, if it picks up, I'll probably jump back into covering the weekly breakdowns. Or of course, if the YouTube gods require it, then I also may jump back in. But honestly guys, I think this has turned from a weekly breakdown to an honest review. And yeah, my honest opinion is it's a nice little show to watch. Like I'm not fully slating it and putting it down. Like it's nice just to throw on, but it's nothing that I'm happy to kind of leave it playing while I go to the toilet or I go and put the kettle on and have a drink. I'm not really fully invested in it. It's just something that you can put on in the background. Now, of course, it is not just about me, guys. As always, it is about you at home. So what did you guys think of the show? Have you watched the first 2 episodes and did it land better for you, or are you in the same camp as me? And of course, Pluribus is out just around the corner and we'll be covering that for you unless it flops like one of Rob's arrows. Now, I am also working on a nice Fallout video, guys, before we get to Season 2. I'm hoping to do a bit of a recap and then something special. That'll be dropping in the next few weeks, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for that. And of course, I'll leave it over to you, so let us know in the comments, hit that subscribe button and like, and of course, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time with something new.